I'm going to tell you the story of how a regular Tuesday morning flight turned into a moment that nobody on that plane, least of all me, will ever forget. Imagine this. You're just minding your business heading to a conference you've worked your whole life to reach, and suddenly with your carry-on still half stuffed in the overhead, a flight attendant's voice slices through the cabin. Ma'am, you need to cover yourself immediately or you will be removed from this aircraft. Dead silence. Every head swivels. And there I am, Dr. Maya Johnson, 42 years old neurologist, keynote speaker wearing what I always wear to speak in front of a room full of doctors, frozen in place, feeling the burn of 100 strangers' eyes, my cream silk blouse suddenly a scarlet letter. Now, if you've ever been the center of a scene you didn't create, that particular humiliation. There's a tight-lipped blonde flight attendant, Karen, her name tag says, looking at me like I just showed up to church in a bikini. Meanwhile, I glance around and see a young woman 2 rows up in a spaghetti-strapped tank top, bare midriff on full display, and nobody's saying a word to her. My mind's racing. Is this real? It's 2025. Are we really still here? But before I can even form a response, a voice from first class, calm, authoritative, absolutely impossible to ignore, calls out, "Excuse me. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm James Wilson, attorney at law, and I'd like to address what appears to be a clear violation of this passenger's rights." And just like that, you could feel the mood shift, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. Let me back up a sec, because to understand what went down, you need to know who was on that flight. I was running late, sprinting through Hartsfield-Jackson, hearing my mother's voice in my head. You always have to look twice as good to get half the respect. She and my father had marched in Birmingham with Dr. King. I grew up on stories of dignity under fire. My mother, a nurse, my dad, a science teacher who saved newspaper clippings about every black doctor he could find, giving me a roadmap for a future he wouldn't live to see. He'd given me a vintage stethoscope from Birmingham's first black physician when I started med school, my own little talisman. Every step I carried my family's history with me, and that Tuesday morning was no different. When I finally made it to the gate out of breath late, but still put together, I saw a silver-haired man reading a real newspaper, old school like my dad used to do. He gave me a nod as I boarded, and for a second I thought he looked familiar, but I brushed it off. I found my row, greeted the teenager, already sprawled in the window seat. Headphones, don't talk to me, energy, excused myself, squeezed into the middle seat and reached up to stash my bag. And yeah, my blouse did ride up maybe an inch as I stretched. Nothing scandalous, nothing I wouldn't wear to treat a patient, deliver a lecture, or meet with the dean of medicine. But to Karen, that single inch became her mission for the day. So there we are, her telling me to cover up or get off me, standing in the aisle with my heart pounding and 100 eyes on me. She points to my stomach, says something about families on this flight, but doesn't seem to care that half the college girls boarding are basically in pajamas, or that a guy a few rows up is wearing a tank top with armholes down to his waist. I ask to see the policy. She refuses. Tension's building. The girl next to me, Zoe, maybe 16, 15, starts filming with her phone. You know how it goes nowadays, right? Everything gets recorded. And then James Wilson from first class stands up, and I realize I do know that name. Civil rights attorney argued before the Supreme Court changed school funding laws. Not the kind of man who sits quietly when he sees something unjust. He steps into the aisle and asks Karen point blank if the dress code is being applied equally to all passengers. The air in the cabin is electric, like everyone's holding their breath. Karen tries to brush him off, but he's not having it. Points out other passengers whose outfits violate her made-up standard. The pilot calls for everyone to take their seats, but James holds his ground, tells Karen to acknowledge that my attire is fine and let me fly. There's a long, agonizing pause. Karen's face red, her jaw working, then she relents. "Of course," she says, and the whole plane exhales at once. When I finally sit down, Zoe leans over, eyes wide. "That was badass. I got the whole thing. It's already blowing up on TikTok." I smile, but honestly, I'm exhausted. The cost of these public victories, the energy, the calculation, the risk of escalation never shows up in the viral clip. As we taxi, James returns to first class, and I realize he nodded at me. Not out of pity, but recognition. One professional to another, both used to fighting for space in rooms that weren't built for us. The flight itself is uneventful until turbulence hits, and in that jolt, Karen nearly loses her balance. Instinct takes over. I grab her arm, steady her, and for a split second, the tension melts. She thanks me quietly, almost like she's seeing me as a person for the first time. When we land, as I wait for my bag, James walks over, offers me his card, mentions the conference, says he recognized my name, tells me my work is impressive. Karen appears face open, posture unsure, and surprisingly apologizes. Says she's been thinking that maybe she didn't enforce the rules fairly. It's not a perfect apology, but it's real. I thank her more out of relief than forgiveness. Sometimes you just want to move forward. Then Zoe pipes up. Her video has gone viral, comments pouring in, people demanding justice, asking if I'll sue the airline. Part of me wants to hide, part of me wants to shout, and part of me just wants to breathe and move on. We walk through O'Hare, me, James, and Zoe trailing along with her phone. Turns out Zoe's grandma was one of the first black flight attendants at United. She shares photos with us, later stories about being told to straighten her hair, wear heavier makeup, fight every day just to keep the job. The thread runs through all our lives. Different generations, same struggle for dignity and respect. Over coffee, Karen joins us. Yeah, you heard that right. She sits down at the table. She talks about her dad, a cop in Cincinnati, how he believed in fairness, but how sometimes rules themselves aren't fair. We talk about dress codes, about who gets to decide what's appropriate about microaggressions, and real aggression about the burden of always being the one who has to correct, explain, defend. Zoe's jaw drops when we talk about people being fired for their hair schools targeting girls' outfits, all the ways rules get weaponized. James tells stories from courtrooms in the 80s, security guards thinking he's a defendant, not counsel. Karen admits to decades of enforcing standards. She never questioned some that nearly broke her colleagues. We connect over that shared exhaustion, the extra work we all do, whether we chose it or not. Afterwards, I go to my conference, James, to his meeting, Zoe, to her grandmother's. The video keeps blowing up. By that evening, Karen's airline is reaching out, offering a formal apology and inviting both me and James to help with their diversity training. Maybe it's PR, maybe it's real change, hard to tell, but I'm hopeful. 2 weeks later, James is teaching workshops on unconscious bias. Zoe's doing a school project on her grandma's flight attendant days. Karen joins the airline's diversity committee even though she takes some heat from her crew. And me, I give a TED talk about neuroplasticity and bias, how our brains can change, how society can too, but it takes awareness and discomfort and real work. A year later, I board the same flight to Chicago for the next conference. Karen's at the door greeting passengers, not stiff, but genuinely warm. She and I exchange a nod. Nothing needs to be said. I take my seat. James is in first class again. Zoe sends me a message with a link to her now finished documentary about black flight attendants. The world didn't change overnight, but that flight, one confrontation, one viral video, one uncomfortable conversation at a time, nudged it forward. Now, if you've ever witnessed something like this, or been the one who spoke up, or the one who needed backup, share your story below. Does justice always look like a court case? Or does it sometimes look like a hard conversation at a crowded airport Starbucks? Let's hear what you think, because these are the stories that move us all a little closer to real understanding.
Xin chào các bạn, mình là Trinh, mình phụ trách viết content. Trên đây là những công việc của mình, là mình lên mạng xã hội tìm hiểu những video.
Next one? Alright. Thank you, man. Hey, if you guys have any trouble, let some rally now, please.
After the tree to hold on to.
Yeah, there were.